Buenos Aires, a sprawling metropolis of nearly 3 million people, Argentina's beating heart and economic engine. Above ground, the streets pulse with endless streams of pedestrians, cars, and buses weaving through colonial architecture and modern skyscrapers. But beneath the surface lies something equally vital, a labyrinth of tunnels and tracks that move hundreds of thousands of people every single day. This is the Buenos Aires Metro, and it's in crisis. What was once a source of national pride, the first underground rail system in all of South America, has become a daily reminder of infrastructure decay and unfulfilled promises. Trains break down, stations crumble, commuters wait in overcrowded platforms, squeezed into carriages that should have been retired decades ago. But recently, something changed. Argentina decided it was time to act. The government announced an ambitious, multi-million-dollar initiative to completely overhaul the subway system, and they opened the project to the world. More than 30 countries submitted bids. Engineering giants from Europe, Asia, and the Americas competed for the contract. But in the end, only two nations made it to the final round: China and India. The stakes were enormous. The winner would not only secure a $300 million contract, but also gain a foothold in Latin America's infrastructure future. The loser would face questions about credibility, competence, and global competitiveness. So what happened? How did China emerge victorious? And why, despite aggressive campaigning, was India ultimately turned away? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most significant infrastructure battles of the decade, a story of aging trains, geopolitical ambition, and the razor-thin margins that separate success from failure on the world stage. To understand why this project matters so much, we need to go back in time. December 1st, 1913, Buenos Aires inaugurates Latin America's very first subway line. It's a moment of triumph for Argentina, a declaration that this young nation is ready to stand alongside the great cities of Europe and North America. The metro becomes a symbol of progress, modernity, and ambition. For decades, the system expands. New lines are dug, new stations open. By the mid-20th century, the Buenos Aires Metro is a lifeline for millions, connecting neighborhoods, enabling commerce, and knitting the city together. But then, something shifts. Economic crises hit Argentina repeatedly throughout the late 20th century. Governments change, budgets shrink, maintenance gets deferred. The trains that were cutting edge in the 1950s and 60s are still running in the 2000s, not because they're timeless classics, but because there's no money to replace them. Fast forward to today. The Buenos Aires Metro now consists of 7 lines spanning nearly 69 kilometers. In 2019 alone, it carried 326 million passengers, an average of almost 900,000 people per day. That's roughly equivalent to moving the entire population of San Francisco every single day. But here's the problem. The infrastructure simply cannot keep up. Line B, the busiest corridor in the entire network, sees an average of 180,000 passengers daily. The trains serving this critical route? Many of them are Mitsubishi units imported from Japan over 6 decades ago. Think about that for a moment. These trains were built when John F. Kennedy was president, when the Beatles were still years away from their first hit, when the internet was pure science fiction. Other trains aren't much better. Spanish-made CAF 6000 series vehicles, introduced in the early 2000s, are now over 20 years old and showing their age. Metal fatigue, outdated electrical systems, worn-out braking mechanisms. The list of problems grows longer every year. The tracks themselves tell an even grimmer story. Years of insufficient maintenance have caused warping and degradation. Engineers estimate that annual maintenance costs exceed $6 million, and that figure keeps climbing. Worse still, the power supply system, much of it dating back to the original 1913 installation, runs on just 600 volts DC, a standard that's woefully inadequate for modern high-capacity trains. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a safety crisis waiting to happen. A derailment, a catastrophic mechanical failure, a power system collapse. Any of these could result in hundreds of casualties. The Argentine government knew they couldn't keep patching and praying. Something had to change. In 2023, Argentina's leadership made a decision. They would launch the most comprehensive metro modernization program in the country's history. The initial plan was modest by international standards, roughly $150 million to purchase 16 new train sets, each consisting of 6 cars. The primary goal was simple: replace the most dangerous and unreliable trains on Line B. But as planning progressed, the scope of the problem became clearer. Engineering assessments revealed that Line B wasn't the only route in desperate need of new equipment. Lines A, C, and others were also operating ancient fleets. The capacity shortage wasn't limited to one corridor. It was system-wide. Moreover, Argentina wasn't just looking to replace old trains with slightly newer old trains. They wanted to leapfrog into the future. The new specifications called for modern, energy-efficient vehicles capable of automated operation. They wanted trains that could meet the city's needs, not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 30. So the government revised the plan. The order increased from 16 train sets to 29. The power system would be upgraded from 600 volts to 1,500 volts, bringing it in line with global standards. The antiquated third-rail power delivery system would be replaced with an overhead catenary system, safer, more efficient, and more reliable. And here's where it gets interesting. The tender requirements included financing mechanisms. Argentina wasn't just buying trains. They were looking for a partner who could help structure payment plans, potentially offer favorable credit terms, and support the project financially over the long term. The revised budget climbed to approximately $300 million, still manageable within Argentina's fiscal constraints, but now representing one of the largest infrastructure investments in Buenos Aires in decades. When the international tender was announced, the response was overwhelming. Companies from over 30 countries submitted expressions of interest: European manufacturers with century-long histories, Asian conglomerates with cutting-edge technology, even North American firms threw their hats in the ring. But as the evaluation process unfolded, the field narrowed. Technical specifications eliminated some bidders. Cost proposals disqualified others. Political and diplomatic considerations played their part. Eventually, only 3 companies remained: 1 from India and 2 powerhouse corporations from China. The final battle had begun. India's representative in this competition was BEML, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, a state-owned enterprise with deep roots in India's industrial sector. BEML isn't just any company. Founded in 1964, it has been instrumental in India's infrastructure development for over half a century. They manufacture everything from mining equipment to defense vehicles. And in recent years, they've made significant inroads into rail transit. BEML's rail division has designed and produced metro cars for several Indian cities. They operate large manufacturing facilities with substantial production capacity. Their engineering teams have worked on complex projects involving varied terrain, extreme weather conditions, and challenging infrastructure environments. All experiences that could, in theory, translate well to Argentina's needs. The company arrived in Buenos Aires with confidence. Their proposal emphasized innovation, customization, and competitive pricing. BEML representatives met frequently with Argentine officials, sometimes on a daily basis, presenting technical documents, answering questions, and promoting their vision for Buenos Aires' transit future. They made promises. They guaranteed on-time delivery. They assured Argentine authorities that quality would never be compromised. They positioned themselves as a partner that understood the challenges of developing nations because India itself was one, a country that had overcome similar infrastructure obstacles. From a diplomatic perspective, the bid also made sense. India and Argentina have historically maintained friendly relations. Both nations are part of the G20, Both have experienced economic volatility and understand the politics of fiscal constraint. There was a natural alignment of interests. But international infrastructure projects aren't won on promises and diplomatic goodwill alone. They're won on technical merit, proven track records, and cold, hard cost-benefit analysis. And that's where BEML's bid began to unravel. Argentina's evaluation team didn't just read proposals and listen to presentations. They really did their homework. Engineers traveled all the way to India to inspect BEML's trains in operation. They visited metro systems in Delhi, Bangalore, and other cities where BEML vehicles were already in service. They actually rode the trains, examined the manufacturing facilities, spoke with local transit authorities, and gathered a whole lot of data on performance, reliability, and maintenance costs. What they found? Well, it was honestly pretty troubling. First, there were concerns about the powertrain. BEML's proposed propulsion system showed inconsistencies in power output stability during testing simulations. And for a metro system that needs to operate trains every few minutes with absolute reliability, even small fluctuations in power delivery can lead to delays, uneven acceleration, and more wear on mechanical components. Then there was the issue of noise. When Argentine inspectors rode BEML trains in Indian cities, they noticed significant operational noise. Not just the normal sounds of wheels on rails, but excessive vibration, rattling, and mechanical sounds that suggested inadequate sound insulation and possible structural resonance issues. Argentina's goal was to provide citizens with a quiet, comfortable, modern travel experience. These trains just didn't meet that standard. Weight was another concern. Modern metro train design really emphasizes lightweight construction, using advanced materials and engineering techniques to reduce energy consumption and track wear, while maintaining structural integrity. BEML's designs, while functional, were less advanced in this regard compared to competing proposals. Heavier trains mean higher energy costs, more stress on aging infrastructure, and reduced efficiency. The evaluation team also took a close look at long-term cost implications. BEML's initial bid looked competitive on price. But when Argentine financial analysts factored in ongoing maintenance costs, spare parts pricing, expected lifespan, and the cost of training local technicians to service unfamiliar systems, the picture changed dramatically. Conservative estimates suggested that over a 25-year operational period, choosing BEML trains would cost Argentina at least $1 million more than the Chinese alternative, possibly a lot more if mechanical issues turned out to be more frequent than projected. There was also the question of experience in Latin America. BEML really had little to no operational history in the region. They had no established supply chains, no local partnerships, no Spanish-speaking technical support teams familiar with Latin American regulatory frameworks and business practices. Every one of these factors alone might have been manageable, but taken together, they created a risk profile that Argentina simply wasn't willing to accept. The Argentine government wasn't looking for the cheapest option. They were looking for the best value, the proposal that balanced cost, quality, reliability, and long-term partnership potential. And well, it was becoming increasingly clear that BEML just wasn't that proposal. While BEML was making its case, two Chinese companies were quietly building an overwhelming advantage. The winner of the final contract was CRRC Corporation Limited, specifically its subsidiary CRRC Changchun Railway Vehicles. If that name doesn't immediately ring any bells for you, here's some context. CRRC is the largest rail vehicle manufacturer in the world. Not just one of the largest, period. Formed in 2015 through the merger of China's two major rail manufacturers, CRRC now controls roughly 70% of the global market for rail vehicles. They've supplied trains to over 100 countries across 6 continents. Their products range from subways to high-speed rail, from freight locomotives to light rail trams. But size alone doesn't win contracts. What set CRRC apart in Argentina was something more fundamental, a proven track record in the country itself. Here's what a lot of observers missed. China's relationship with Argentina's metro system didn't begin with this $300 million contract. It actually began more than a decade earlier. In March 2013, Chinese manufactured subway cars officially entered service on Line A of the Buenos Aires Metro, the very same line that opened in 1913, the historic first subway in South America. This was a major moment. Argentina was entrusting its most iconic transit line to Chinese technology. The trains delivered for Line A consisted of 5 car sets configured with 3 motorized cars and 2 trailers. Each train could seat 664 passengers comfortably and accommodate up to 1,148 at maximum capacity. The 8.5-kilometer line serves 16 stations and passes through some of Buenos Aires' most important landmarks: Plaza de Mayo, the National Congress Building, the iconic obelisk. Here's the crucial part. Those trains performed flawlessly. Over the following decade, they logged millions of kilometers. They transported hundreds of millions of passengers, and their failure rate remained below 5%. A remarkably low figure for metro operations. There were no major safety incidents attributable to vehicle defects, no catastrophic mechanical failures, no scandals about shoddy construction or corner cutting. Argentine commuters, the people who actually ride these trains every day, noticed the difference. The Chinese trains were quieter, smoother, and more reliable than the ancient equipment they replaced. Word spread. Public confidence grew, but CRRC didn't stop at Line A. Over nearly 2 decades of operations in Argentina, they supplied over 150 subway cars, 220 long-distance buses, and countless spare parts. They established local maintenance teams, trained Argentine technicians, and built relationships with everyone from government procurement officials to station managers to the engineers who keep the trains running. This wasn't just about selling hardware. It was about building trust. When Argentina announced the new tender, CRRC didn't have to convince skeptical officials that Chinese trains could work in Buenos Aires. They already knew. They'd seen it with their own eyes for over 10 years. But past performance, while crucial, wasn't the only advantage CRRC brought to the table. Their technical proposal was simply superior. The trains CRRC proposed for this project represent the cutting edge of metro technology. They're designed for a maximum test speed of 450 kilometers per hour and a stable operating speed of 400 kilometers per hour, way beyond what's needed for urban metro service, but really showing off the underlying power and engineering sophistication of the propulsion systems. More relevant to Buenos Aires' immediate needs, the trains feature advanced energy recovery systems that capture kinetic energy during braking and feed it back into the power grid. Over thousands of daily braking events across the entire fleet, this translates to significant energy savings, millions of dollars over the system's lifespan. The trains also incorporate sophisticated climate control, real-time monitoring systems that can predict mechanical issues before they cause failures, and modular designs that make maintenance and repairs faster and less expensive. Critically, CRRC's engineers redesigned key components specifically for Buenos Aires' challenging infrastructure environment. They knew the tracks were imperfect, warped in places, worn in others. They knew the power supply system was being upgraded, but would still face challenges. So they built in tolerances, redundancies, and adaptive systems to ensure smooth operation even under less than ideal conditions. The financing structure CRRC offered was also favorable. They proposed flexible payment terms, potentially backed by Chinese development banks, that would ease the immediate fiscal burden on Argentina's budget while ensuring the project could move forward without delays. From Argentina's perspective, this wasn't just a purchase. It was a partnership with a proven entity that had the technical capability, financial resources, and local knowledge to deliver on its promises. When Argentina announced that CRRC had won the contract, the response from India was, well, swift and pretty bitter. BML and Indian media outlets quickly suggested that the decision was unfair. Some even went further, alleging that Chinese companies had bribed Argentine officials to secure the contract, a serious accusation that, if true, would constitute corruption on an international scale. But here's what we know. No credible evidence of bribery has ever been presented. Argentine authorities have denied any impropriety. International observers who tracked the bidding process noted that it followed standard procurement protocols, with multiple rounds of technical evaluation, financial analysis, and committee reviews. So, the allegations appear to be more about frustration than fact. India has been making a major push to expand its infrastructure exports as part of its broader geopolitical strategy. Losing a high-profile contract to China, India's regional rival, was a blow not just to BEML, but honestly, to India's international reputation as an emerging infrastructure power. It's worth noting that this isn't the only such case. In recent years, Chinese companies have consistently outbid Indian firms for infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The pattern is clear. When projects come down to technical merit and proven performance, China's vast experience and track record tend to prevail. This isn't about nationalism or geopolitics. It's about results. Argentina needed trains that would work, that would last, and that would deliver value for money. The evaluation process, flawed as any human endeavor might be, determined that CRRC was the best choice. And the numbers support that conclusion. Under the terms of the agreement, CRRC will manufacture and deliver 174 new subway cars, forming 29 complete train sets over the coming years. The first batch is scheduled to enter service in the first quarter of 2027. These initial trains will begin replacing the oldest vehicles on Line B, immediately improving reliability and passenger comfort on Buenos Aires' busiest metro corridor. Subsequent deliveries will follow in phases, allowing for systematic fleet replacement across multiple lines. By the time the project is complete, Argentina's metro system will have been fundamentally transformed. But, the trains are only part of the story. Argentina is simultaneously upgrading the entire supporting infrastructure. The electrical system is being increased from 600 volts to 1,500 volts. A massive undertaking that requires replacing substations, rewiring tunnels, and updating safety systems throughout the network. The old third rail power delivery system, where trains draw electricity from an electrified rail running alongside the tracks, is being replaced with an overhead catenary system. This is the same system used by high-speed rail networks worldwide, more efficient, safer, and capable of delivering the power needed by modern, high-performance trains. Track sections are being replaced. Stations are being renovated. Signal systems are being digitized. When this project is complete, Buenos Aires will have one of the most modern metro systems in all of Latin America. The broader implications extend beyond Argentina. Other Latin American cities are watching this project closely. If it succeeds, if the trains perform well, if the project stays on budget, if passengers are satisfied, it could open the door to similar contracts across the continent. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, all have aging metro systems or are planning new ones. All represent potential markets worth billions of dollars. China's success in Buenos Aires could be the foundation for decades of infrastructure collaboration across the region. This story is about more than trains. It's about the shifting balance of global infrastructure power. For most of the 20th century, European and North American companies dominated international infrastructure projects. If you needed to build a subway, you called on German engineering or French expertise. If you wanted high-speed rail, you looked to Japan. But in the 21st century, that landscape has changed. China has emerged as the world's infrastructure superpower, not through geopolitical maneuvering or predatory lending, but through a simple formula: deliver quality products on time and on budget, backed by comprehensive support and financing. China built this capability at home first. Over the past 3 decades, China constructed the world's largest high-speed rail network, over 40,000 kilometers of track, more than the rest of the world combined. They built metro systems in dozens of cities, moving billions of passengers annually. They experimented, failed, learned, and improved. And then they took that expertise global. Today, Chinese trains run in over 100 countries. Chinese engineers are building railways across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Chinese financing is backing infrastructure projects on every inhabited continent. This isn't charity or imperialism, it's business. And it's business that China has learned to do better than almost anyone else. The Buenos Aires Metro project is a perfect microcosm of this shift. Argentina had options. They considered proposals from multiple countries, including established players with long histories in rail transit. But when they evaluated everything, technical merit, cost, reliability, partnership potential, China came out on top. That should be a wake-up call for other nations hoping to compete in the global infrastructure market. Success doesn't come from promises or from having been a major player in the past. It comes from proven performance, competitive pricing, and the ability to deliver results. So, what can we take away from this story? First, infrastructure matters. The trains we ride, the tracks they run on, the power systems that energize them. These aren't just technical details. They're the foundation of urban life in the 21st century. When they work, cities thrive. When they fail, cities struggle. Second, competition drives progress. Argentina benefited enormously from having multiple countries compete for this contract. The competitive pressure ensured they got the best possible proposal, with better technology and better terms than they might have received in a less competitive process. Third, relationships and trust are as important as technology.